Hi, happy Sunday, everyone. Peace and welcome, family, to another soul centered episode of Uncovering Hidden Healing. So, I'm your host, Arletha Lizana, healer, educator, and founder of Women Incorporated. Each Sunday, this series reconnects us to the sacred knowledge of African and African diaspora natural medicine so we can heal deeply, body, mind, and spirit. So, this work is done in partnership with Morehouse School of Medicine and Permetra International. And together, we are remembering the ancestral paths to true wellness. Today's episode goes straight to the heart of healing. We're exploring how to identify and address the root cause of illness beyond surface level symptoms so we can really reclaim vitality, balance, and peace in our lives. So, our guest today is the brilliant, and deeply devoted Dr. Asia Barkley, owner of 100% Chiropractic in Fayetteville, Georgia, and a leader in holistic healing. Dr. Barkley healed herself of uterine fibroids and other lifestyle related illnesses using spiritual and nutritional methods. And that healing journey sparked her mission. Since then, she has helped countless others to do the same through chiropractic care, nutritional counseling, energy work, and more. She's also a wife, a mother, educator, and mentor, and someone who truly embodies what it means to walk the healing path. So, Dr. Asia, welcome to Uncovering Hidden Healing. We are so excited to have this conversation with you today.
Hello.
Yeah, welcome. Yeah, I'm so excited. So, well, let's start at the beginning. So what does it mean to actually get to the root cause of illness, and why is this a revolutionary approach in today's world?
Well, the root cause is easier in other countries, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in Western culture, the root cause is 99% of the time missed. You know, almost in oh, man, 99% of patients they never get to the root cause. They only deal with the symptomatology, or they end up having a surgery. The illness comes back.
Mm-hmm.
Time and time again. So understanding the root cause means that the person who has the illness or has the disease or disorder, right, has to ask the one fundamental question: why?
Mm-hmm.
Why? And so, really, every doctor is trained to ask why. So the question I always ask is, why didn't you ask why?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
talking to a patient's primary care physician, I'll always say, did you ask why? Did you research why? Why does this patient have this? And most of the time they can't answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
So then I have to go and answer that question for them. You
Mm-hmm.
know, so um, that's how you really, once you begin to ask why, now everything kicks into gear. Your
Mm-hmm.
spirit, everything kicks into gear to find the answer to that question.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they came up. And so Western culture is really notorious, really, for
Mm-hmm.
ignoring the why, because a lot of times the why is not in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
Why is not the symptom. The why can sometimes be emotional. The why can sometimes be spiritual. The why can sometimes be physical.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, it's a combination of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, it's a combination of all of them.
Yeah. I mean, that's so interesting because I feel like when I go to my primary care physician, she's really cool, by the way. But when I go, most of the time we're not asking that question. We're not asking why. And if we do, it's usually like maybe really general, like inflammation. I'm like, oh, okay, so what does that mean? Like, some of
Yes,
us
yes,
don't
yes.
know what that means per se. So, I mean, you've shared your own healing journey began with fibroids.
Mhm.
So, what did that experience teach you about the body's ability to heal itself?
So backing up a little bit,
Hmm.
the healing journey began before the fibroids even happened. They came about in my 20s.
Hmm.
So as early as I can remember, I remember family members just innately coming to me and saying, "Hey, how do I heal this?" I remember being probably around 8 or 9, and my grandmother had the first ever prescriptions for nutritional healing. I know a lot of your audience know that
Yeah,
book.
yeah, I have that book. My dad had that book. I remember that. Yeah.
I remember taking a summer and reading that book from front to back cover at 8.
Wow.
and being
Extraordinary.
able to remember all of it.
Mhm.
So work just really just kind of came easy. So by the time I got into my early 20s and had something to heal, I met a naturopathic doctor by the name of Dr. Akila. And now she's in France. She got tired of the United States, but now,
Yeah.
so, and she was like, hey, girl, you can heal this. And she wrote some things down on a piece of paper. And it was just easy for me.
Wow.
I mean, it was easy. It was like, do this, do this, do this. I combined that with a few other things that maybe, that's for a whole nother series. I don't want to open that can of worm for your audience. And then we have a different setup.
Right. They might ask you, but go ahead.
And it was very easy. I mean, 3 months in, the fibroids were gone.
Hmm.
So
Wow.
it was just an easy process for me. So the healing work has always come very easy. And so the journey started in childhood.
Hmm.
Even the chiropractic journey started in childhood where my brother would come to me and say, hey, can you crack my back?
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Mhm.
I would be like 12 and he's asking me to crack his back. And
Yeah.
he would know when I rushed it. At 12
Uh-huh.
years old, I hadn't even, I mean,
Right. He's like, you gotta do
he's
it
like,
better.
you rushed through it,
Uh, that's right. Wow.
so all it's interesting when you're a healer how it starts probably
That's right.
before this lifetime,
Mhm.
and so
Yeah.
fast forwarding into by the time we got the fibroids, everything was just easy. I was
Yeah.
excited to be able to heal it.
Hmm. Wow. That
Yeah,
is like so amazing. Like I said, and it's like you bring up kind of like this idea, like, like when you become a healer. And like you were saying, it's before you get here, really,
oh
right?
yeah,
And
oh
then you
absolutely.
get here. And now I'm starting to recognize some of the things that maybe I did as a child or my children do. And I wasn't looking at them as healing before. So thank you for that. That's really interesting. And I like how, you started on this journey, like just really early and you recognize that. So, you
Absolutely.
know, yeah, let's talk about this like root cause medicine. Like, what is it? Like, and how is it different from just like symptom management?
Yes. So most of the time for example, when a patient comes in to the practice, I sit down with each case, as busy as we are, you've been there. And I
Mhm.
take the time and I sit down with each and every case and I ask why. So if a patient comes in and they tell me, they say, okay, I have high blood pressure, I have diabetes, I have, back pain, neck pain, fibroids, whatever it is, cancer. The first question I say is, why do they have this high blood pressure?
Mhm.
Right? So this is just an example. Or why do they have this high blood sugar? So then it may lead me to maybe their pancreas is dysfunctioning.
Mhm.
Okay, no problem, except why is the pancreas dysfunctioning?
Mhm.
Got it?
Yes.
So then it may ask why the pancreas is dysfunctioning. That answer may come. Okay, so now why is that happening? And you keep asking why and uncovering answers until you get down to the absolute root of it, right? And
Mhm.
so once you get down to the root, anything is healable.
Yeah.
Now, this is the key.
Yeah.
You have to have time.
Time. Hmm.
Time is the key, right? So
Hmm.
if you come in and the doctor's giving you 2 weeks to live. That's
Hmm.
different, you
Right.
know. But the
Hmm.
moment that doctor say I got 6 months, it's a wrap, right? I'm gonna
Hmm.
heal this because I have time.
That's
As
right.
long as you have the right doctor in front of you that's willing to ask, why is it there?
Mm.
Not what it is.
Hmm.
Diagnosis is just that. It's just a diagnosis. A diagnosis means that I've given this a name.
Hmm.
I've given this disease a name because it's like this living being, right?
Hmm.
And I've named it. And
Hmm.
so that's it. But the name of the disorder or disease is not the cause of it. You
Hmm.
gotta ask, why is this happening?
That's right.
For example, some people have diabetes and is not, some people have a very healthy lifestyle and they have
Hmm.
why?
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's not always related to what you eat. You
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
so that's important. The
Hmm.
other thing I noticed is that in America, the first thing that people want to get rid of is meat. It's like meat is
Hmm.
like the root cause to
Yeah.
every disease.
Yeah.
But in my travels around the world and studying naturopathic medicine in different areas of the planet, what I realize is that everybody eat meat,
Mhm. Uh-huh.
but
Yeah.
not all of them have diabetes or high blood pressure or overweight or obese.
Mm-hmm.
I once met a raw foodist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she had been a raw foodist for about 4 years, and so she came to me and she was like, I got just got diagnosed with breast cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So automatically, that told me that something else is going on other than what she was eating.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so the raw food became her label, how she,
Yeah.
it became who she was. It became the Bible. It became her religion,
Mm-hmm.
right? But
Mm-hmm.
it didn't get down to the root cause of why her health issues were even there. And so because she never, over the 4 years, she never got down to the root cause, so it turned into something a little bit bigger, you know,
Mm-hmm.
to have to heal, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, that makes a lot of
So
sense
you gotta
because,
ask yourself
yeah,
why.
why?
That's
Yep.
the key.
The key is why. It's all going back to why.
Yep, and they give
Right.
you a diagnosis, but why is that there? Can you tell
That
me why
makes
it's
me want to
there?
get a T-shirt. It need to say why. This why.
Yes, you gotta ask why, and
Yeah.
that's the key. And
Yeah.
that's why I've had so much success in my practice because I sit down and I ask why.
Mm-hmm.
And then I keep asking why
Mm-hmm.
until I hit rock bottom on my why. And I
Mm-hmm.
go, that's it.
Yep.
And I'll
Yeah.
call up the patient and go, hey, are you having this? And this?
Uh-huh.
No. You
Yep.
know,
Yep.
if you just ask why, you can tap into the patient's orbit or their energy field.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can go back to the patient and say, hey, are you doing this? And, and let them answer yes.
Mm-hmm.
Let them answer
Yep.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can do that for yourself.
Yeah.
Ask yourself why.
Yourself why and keep
Yeah.
going. I love that. I love that. And it's funny, like you were saying, sometimes we get attached to the label, like I'm this, I'm that, it's kind
Yeah.
of like in what you want the outside world to perceive you to be. And just really kind of based on, like you've done research and, that this is bad for some people. So, I want to
Yeah.
be this. So it's kind of like hard sometimes to break out of those, labels of what you created for yourself. So that's really interesting. But can you tell me what are some of the common root causes of illnesses that often go undetected, like especially in Black communities and among women?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Environment is a huge one. You
Hmm.
know, among Black people don't understand how mentally and emotionally unhealthy and stressed they really are. And what I've noticed is in our communities, especially, we tend to connect the material. So the more material we have, meaning the more money, the stronger our career, the more we have these accolades and everything like that, we tend to connect that to our happiness.
Hmm.
And then what we quickly find out is the absolute opposite, right? Where money actually makes whoever you are come to you quicker. So
Yeah,
if you were miserable before you got all of this, boy, you can buy misery now,
that's
right?
you're
So
right. You can buy that's deep. You can buy
you
misery.
know,
Yep.
so you go out and you think that you have all of this and you're known for all of these great things and how much money you have, and your family now respects you only because of the money, but not because you're a great person,
Mm-hmm.
not because you're living the life you truly want to live,
Yep.
or even because your day to day actually resonates with you,
Mm.
right? So there
Yeah.
has to be this complete resonation of who you want to be in thought,
Mm-hmm.
who you say you are, and then what you do throughout your entire day.
Mm-hmm.
And you're
Yes.
more likely to have your spirit to keep all of the illness at bay, right? So you're
Mm-hmm.
human. So that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean you're never going to get sick, right? It doesn't mean you won't get an infection from here time to time. It doesn't mean that you won't get sick. So the body is the body. The environment is the environment, right? The region we live in on the planet has its subset of illnesses that come with that region. The key though is, do you have the ability to heal it?
Mm-hmm.
That's the key.
That's
And
right.
if something goes on too long, you got to start asking different questions.
Mhm. Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, like how you started talking about, like stress. And it's funny because I'm one of those people, I didn't even know I was stressed. Like,
That's right.
like if something big happened, maybe, but like the little stress, I didn't know. I actually got an aura ring. It was suggested to me maybe about 6 months ago. When I got the ring, it kind of looks at, your stress levels. And I was like, I wasn't doing anything but working. I was at work. like doing my normal
Yep.
work day, and my stress level shot up. And I was
Yep.
like, what in the world? So I wasn't even connecting to
That's
when
right.
I was stressed. So I really had to kind of take a step back and examine, like, even work was stressing me and why.
That's
Like,
exactly
I had to
right.
keep
That's
asking.
exactly right.
Yeah.
I love to teach my patients through storytelling, if that's
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So I had a patient once come in, beautiful person. She was a principal of a school that she had created this amazing environment. I mean, she went to Spelman. I mean, all
Mhm.
the walls were painted with HBCUs. Everybody loved going to the school. The teachers loved her, so they never left. All the things.
Mhm.
So she ends up getting into a car accident. So she comes
Mhm.
into the practice, and for some strange reason, the pain, whenever she would walk into the building, the pain
Mhm.
would come back, and she would go.
Mhm.
So finally, I kept asking her why, you know,
Mhm.
and then, so over the time I would go, when is the pain coming? And so finally, she began to say, Doc, I narrowed it down. It's when I go to work, when I get off work, I'm in pain when I'm at work. And I
Mhm.
go, you find that interesting that when you go to work, the pain comes back. And
That's right.
so she said, yeah. So she didn't think about it initially, but over time I kept saying, okay, so when did the pain come back? Today, because you were off work for 2 weeks. I took her out of work. I wanted
Mhm.
her to do her own clinical study on herself, right?
Mhm. That's
And
right. Yeah.
we realized that when she would go to work, she would get bombarded
That's
with
right.
things that, number one, she had already trained people on, but
Mhm.
they liked
Mhm.
her. So they wanted
Yeah.
to just be in her energy, and it
Just
was
wanted to eat her up. Yep.
you could
Just
feel.
more.
She
Mhm.
also didn't realize that while she liked teaching, she did not like being a principal,
Mhm.
and those are two different things.
Things. Yes. Yes.
I
Mhm.
looked at her and I said, "So when are you going to quit? When are you going to transition
That's
from this?
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, so that you can heal." And she
Yeah.
said, "I can't quit. They're depending on me." And I said, "I'll just let that be that." By the end of the
Mhm.
school year, she had gotten
Yeah.
herself into a promotion where she can work from home, where she was training.
Mhm.
From that
Yeah.
point, her pain levels went down to a zero.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
found why,
Mhm.
you know.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so very important to connect the fact that what you say you want to do during the day, what
Yes.
you truly want to do inside, and you being successful at work is not enough. Just because
Mhm.
everybody likes you doesn't mean that that's what on the inside you're aligning with what you
That's
really want to do. So if what you really want to do, for example, is not be uh an amazing doctor at Morehouse School of Medicine, what you really want to do
right.
is be a naturopathic healer,
Yep.
then you're gonna have some challenges because those two collide, and you're not saying
That's
it out loud,
right.
right? It's
Yes.
inside of
Mhm.
you, but boy, are you successful. So now
Yeah.
you have diabetes, and now you're getting high blood pressure, and you're gaining weight, but you're exercising every day. So you're like, why can't I get the weight off? Well, the
That's right.
weight is the unhappiness that you're not admitting to yourself or
Mhm.
do anything about, that you really hate something that you're successful in. So it's
Like, you just said a word. That is so deep. All of that is just like, wow. Like that is,
yeah,
yeah, that is so deep.
yeah.
So I mean, like, just continue. So how do these unprocessed emotions or like spiritual disconnections, like how do they manifest physically in the body? Like how does that happen? Like, so it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's kind of like abstract as some of us. Like, so how did that emotion get to the body? You know, if that makes sense. Like how does it get in
Yes,
there and
I
start
get it.
doing things? Yeah.
It will first start off with organs, right?
Hmm.
So remember, organs flow freely when the body's at a completely relaxed state. In order
Hmm.
for that to happen, the mind has to be in a certain space. So stress is normal, right? In
Hmm.
our environment, I don't care who you are, stress is normal.
Right.
Okay.
Hmm.
However, you can be under stress, but your mind can still be at peace.
Hmm.
Yes.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so emotions begin to attack the body when they go on too long.
Hmm.
And so if you decide to stay, for example, in a state of grieving, for
Hmm.
say I know someone very close to me, their wife died. like
Mm-hmm.
17 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they're still grieving today, 17 years later, like it happened yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
17 years later,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
to watch the degeneration of that,
Mm-hmm.
and disease after disease come about. This
Mm-hmm.
person has broken their neck, they've broken their shoulder, they've broken their ankle, uh,
Mm-hmm.
all of these things. And so what happens is the first thing that gets affected is the organs. So then you start going to the doctor because you don't feel good, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Symptoms. And then
Mm-hmm.
you start getting the diagnosis over time.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make
That's
sense?
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And so, first you start off with these lifestyle related diagnoses.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm going to hit a hard pause there.
Okay.
A lot of times when we're unhappy, there are these kind of micro, how can I put it so the audience understands it? There
Mm-hmm.
are these micro, invisible, intangible suicidal actions that we take,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So the person might start eating a bunch of sugar, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or although the sugar is not the cause, the
Yeah.
cause was the fact that they're just unhappy and
Yeah.
miserable.
Or drinking a lot or something. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Calm down.
They know their spirit will communicate with them daily and say, man, I should. So then there's this second layer that happens of guilt because your spirit's talking to you, but you
Right.
keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense? And
Mm-hmm.
so now the disease is like settled in. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're doing it. Now you got somebody else outside of your spirit telling you shouldn't do it. So that energy has compounded of I shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, you've made it a habit, and spiritually, you don't have anybody to step in or a culture to step in to say, let's put a boundary on this. You don't have the environment for it, so it keeps going.
Mm-hmm.
And then you may not be strong enough, discipline wise, to stop it at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So the one thing that I want the audience to hear in this moment is this: if you stop doing what's making you sick, your body will heal.
Hmm. Yeah. So say it again. That's
If
good.
you stop doing what's making you sick, your body will heal. But
Mm-hmm.
you also have to know what's making you sick.
That's
Because
right.
it may not be the sugar per se. I
Mm-hmm.
know, let me tell you something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My father
Mm-hmm.
eats as much ice cream and candy and cookies and pies as anybody I've ever seen in my life, and he still is not diabetic.
That's right.
What does that tell you? In
Yeah.
fact, this is the power of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Father truly believes in his heart of hearts, and he's been saying this since I was a child, that ice cream can heal a cold. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So what do you believe?
Mm-hmm.
What do you believe? And
That's right.
whatever you believe also creates this emotion behind that.
Mm-hmm.
So the emotion
Right.
becomes
Mm-hmm.
very tangible, meaning it produces a reaction at a cellular level in the body where the cells begin to transform in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like they set off a motion in the body of a pattern that you don't want to go down. Now,
Mm-hmm.
all you have to do is reverse that pattern.
Mm-hmm. That's
So
right.
you take that in reverse. You find a way to tap into the emotion. You find a way to dissipate that emotion.
That's
Then you find a way to change what it is you believe. That's the
mm-hmm.
key.
That's
You
right.
can always unbelieve something, believe it or not. You can
Yeah.
always unbelieve it. Just
Yeah.
because somebody told you that doesn't mean it's true. And now you've kind of turned it upside down.
Mm-hmm.
That makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Yeah.
So
Makes sense.
the emotion reaches the body and the organs, and then it sets off this pattern based
Mm-hmm.
off of a lot of different factors.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to use diabetes again just because it's easy, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
high blood
Mm-hmm.
pressure. So you begin to feel uncomfortable. You're miserable in life. You're highly stressed. Salt has nothing to do with this, FYI. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you're miserable in life. You're highly stressed, or you're secretly miserable, but you're highly successful. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you're starting to feel uncomfortable, where early on from that very first time you feel that symptom that there's some changes that need to be made.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't pay attention to their thoughts, words, and actions. What they typically do instead, they don't change their environment because they're out of fear. They might say, oh my God, I know I'm miserable at work. I'm highly successful. I'm making a lot of money, but I got to feed these kids.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So they
Mm-hmm.
stay in that environment for 10 hours a day, highly stressed. That's a lot of time during the day to be in somewhere you don't want to be.
That's
Does
right.
that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So now you go to the doctor, and the doctor has said, "Oh, you have high blood pressure." In America, what does the doctor tell you? That I mean, we know it's not true, right?
Uh-huh.
The doctor will look you straight in the face and say, "What? There's,
Salt or yeah. Uh-huh.
there's no cure." So now you've chosen to believe
Mm-hmm.
because that person's first name is doctor that there's no cure.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yep, that
Now
makes sense.
you're compounded.
That's right.
Now you believe that you have something that doesn't have a cure.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
we've proven that to be untrue time and time again, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
you behave in that manner and you never change the action because someone you have chosen to respect has told you that what you're dealing with is uncurable. And they
Mm-hmm.
never told you why you have it. And you
Mm.
never thought to ask why.
That's right.
So now you're moving in an energy of this is not curable and I can keep doing exactly what I've been doing. And
Hmm.
I'm going to behave as if I don't know, as if I was never spoken to by my spirit, right? That what I'm doing is not harming me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Yes.
so
Mm-hmm.
that's how it begins to compound,
Mm-hmm.
right? The person that you bring into your life as the person to help you to heal is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Very
Yes.
important. That's
Yes.
very important because that's going to be the person that person, if you respect them, what they speak out of their mouth in that one moment, there's no cure. You got to do this or you won't heal
Mm-hmm.
or whatever the case may be. If it doesn't resonate with you,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to heal anyway. Or if you do heal, it's going to come back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. So it actually brought up two questions I had. So, like, one, what if somebody is disconnected from their body or their spirit, so they don't know? So, what do they do? Like, how do they begin to understand their own health? And the other question is, like, how do you find a good practitioner? How do you find somebody to work with? So, those two
Yes.
things came
So
up.
that's okay. So those two questions. Let's take the first one.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're disconnected, no one is ever disconnected from themselves. They
Mm-hmm.
might be disconnected from how to heal it. They might even disconnect that, for example, food plays a part in health, or they might disconnect sunlight plays a part in health, or they might disconnect their unhappiness, playing a part in health.
Right.
But you're never disconnected from yourself, right? So you're
Mm-hmm.
with yourself all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You and I both know, and I'm pretty sure the audience knows, that no one can tell you who you are because you're with yourself all the time.
That's right.
So somebody might say something about you, and you might go, "That's just not true."
Mm-hmm.
I don't care who you think you are, that's just not true,
Mm-hmm.
because you know yourself,
That's
and
right.
it's just not true about you.
Mm-hmm.
So no one's ever disconnected from it. But what happens is, in Western culture, we're not that spirit that we came with is not nourished.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so religion is something and God is something that may be outside of the person. So they may be disconnected in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they're that disconnected, the first thing that they do is they go to the doctor.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And what they have to pay attention to, because even if you're disconnected from yourself spiritually, you still have feelings.
That's right.
The feelings are the guide to what we're feeling emotive wise, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
emotion is kind of like energy in motion. So the feeling, you still have feelings.
That's right.
Yeah. So how do you feel when when someone is saying something to you?
Mm-hmm.
In that
Mm-hmm.
moment, if I
Mm-hmm.
were to say, to anybody in the audience dealing with any type of disease, if I were to say, hey, that's not a cure for that. Do you truly feel in that
Yeah.
moment that there's not a cure?
Yes.
And it might be a fleeting feeling that happens real quick, like maybe a second, maybe even a microsecond, right? But that feeling came up about and it produced a little bit of fear.
Mm-hmm.
It is that feeling of when they say that you gotta grab that and go
Mm.
look for a different doctor because that doesn't really resonate with me. The
Yes.
answers that he's giving.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
if you can
Mm-hmm.
pause when you have someone say that to you, you just pause because you've disconnected yourself spiritually, no problem, but you haven't disconnected yourself to the why. So you
Mm-hmm.
can pause and say, I know you're saying, Doc, I respect you, and I know you're saying that this is not curable. I know you're saying there's no cure. Why do I have it?
Mm-hmm.
And let them in that moment tell you why.
Uh-huh.
And if they can't, if
Mm-hmm.
they say something like age, weight, you know, in
Yeah.
that moment, you have to have the courage to go through the process. Don't be disrespectful,
Mm-hmm.
be diplomatic, but never go back. And
Mm.
find a doctor that's willing to get down to the bottom of why you have what it is you have.
That's right. Mm.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that's the first thing. So if you're disconnected spiritually and you're feeling like, okay, I don't really have what she's talking about right now,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to go to the doctor because you don't feel good,
That's
you
right.
know?
Mm.
And so when you go, in that moment, that is still setting off this kind of healing energy because now you're going to try to figure out how to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So once you do that, that doctor from that point is taking over that disease state,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and you have to be able to trust them.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and we too often we do so many things, especially I see so many mothers, for example, who come in and vaccinating their a newborn baby just does not resonate with them, but
Mm-hmm.
because the doctor said do it,
Yeah.
right, they
Mm-hmm.
do it and they feel horrible,
About it. Yeah.
especially if the child has side effects. But
Mm-hmm.
the spirit told them in the beginning, don't do that. They had a
Mm-hmm.
feeling. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe if I didn't use the word spirit, they had a feeling
Yeah.
that that's not what they should do to this tiny little newborn baby.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's what it is.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's hard for people to follow that, So it's been we've been so indoctrinated, that the doctor has the answer to everything. That
That's
doctor
right.
basically
That's
holds
right.
all the keys to everything, and that we don't have keys within ourselves. So it's kind of like we may have that, like you said, that feeling when we meet that doctor, but we're like, nah, that can't be right. The doctor's
Mhm.
right. So it's
You're
kind
right.
of like, we ignore those things. So that's
Not trusting
really,
yourself.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's really deep. So,
Mhm.
I
So
love
that
for
was
you.
the first
Go ahead.
question. What was the
Yeah.
second
The
question?
second one was just like how to advocate, for
So
yourself, like
you
you
don't have
say,
to fight. That's
Mhm.
what I want to say. You don't
Yeah.
have to fight,
Mhm.
but you can always ask why.
Mhm.
And if you don't get the answer to your question, it is your responsibility to your own health to find a doctor that can answer why,
Mhm.
that's willing to do the lab, the work, the MRI, the
Mhm.
CT,
That's right.
willing to ask you the hard questions like, "Hey, are you
Mhm.
binge eating? Are you what are you doing over there?"
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, the doctor will ask the questions, and the doctor will help you figure it out if the doctor is willing to be a doctor.
Doctor. Yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
if they're willing to be a doctor, they'll find out. They'll know.
Mhm.
They'll get down to the bottom of it.
That's
Um,
right. Yeah.
yeah,
That's
if
why I
she
have like a really
if
good primary care physician, and that's what she does. Like if she
That's
don't
right.
know the answer, she's like gonna find out, and she's gonna work with you to find out. And I think
That's
that
right.
that's the
That's the
difference. The
key.
willingness.
That's
Yeah.
a good one. And then
Mhm.
sometimes though, for example, I have friends where naturopathic medicine just does not resonate with them.
Mhm.
They feel like if it's not a medical doctor, they ain't trying to deal with it, you know.
Mhm.
And that's great too.
Mhm.
Like I have a very close friend of mine
Mhm.
who had fibroids. Now
Mhm.
she was around, we grew up together. She was around when I healed mine, it healed naturally. She's around,
Mhm.
she sees all these patients that heal naturally that come to my practice.
Yeah.
And when I tell you, when she had fibroids, she was like, I'm going to have this surgery.
Mhm.
But this is the difference. It
Uh-huh.
resonated with her.
Her. Yes.
Yes. So
Mhm.
the surgery really took. And I
Mhm.
mean, 6 weeks she was back in the gym,
That's right.
taking classes. That's the key.
That
Does
is
the solution that you're being offered resonate with you?
you. Mhm. That's
That's the
so
key.
that's so deep because one thing, something that may be good for someone may not be good for something else. Like I said, you have to follow
That's
your
right.
own spirit. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And
She
that's
was
so
like,
interesting because you know how Western medicine is like one size fits all. You
mhm,
get take a Tylenol, even though we know that Tylenol were formulated, for white males. It's like, oh, you can take a Tylenol. Anybody can take a Tylenol for a
that's right.
headache, for this, for that. But like you said, it's not specifically for you. You know what I mean?
That's
It's
right.
not, yes. So it
Yes.
kind of reminds me of what the concepts that they're now bringing forth, like personalized medicine. You hear that a little bit more. It's still not there, but you hear this concept of speaking to what that individual person needs,
That's
their
right.
background history, their genetics, etc.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's so deep. So Dr. Ozzy, I'd love for you to take a few minutes and kind of just walk us through your approach. So when someone walks into your practice or calls you, with symptoms, or they get to you somehow, what's your process to help them find their root and begin healing?
Yes. So, um, So remember, I'm a naturopathic medicine, but I also do chiropractic as well. So how I even started in chiropractic, this is important for the audience to know,
Mm-hmm.
for themselves, not for me, by the way, is I would have patients that would come and they would call me up, and I do a lot of energy medicine,
Mm-hmm.
and I do it my way. And they would come and we would put them on these plans, and I don't care what disease it was, it would heal. But there would be a group of patients where the disease would just, they would heal it and they would continue the lifestyle, but the disease would come back.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, man, what is happening?
Yep.
What is happening?
Yep.
And then one day I just happened to be reading one of my little medical books that I read, and it just happened to talk about the nervous system
Mm-hmm.
and how Western culture really does ignore the nervous system at a high level, really.
Mm-hmm.
And that piqued my interest. That was very intriguing for me. So then I began to try to understand the brain neurology, the spine neurology, and
Mm-hmm.
that's when I started to send my patients for X-rays if
Mm.
the disease will come back a second time.
Okay.
And what I would find is exactly where the patient had the disease, right? The
Mm-hmm.
nerves that service those organs is where they would be the most degenerated neurologically, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where they would have degenerated disc spaces, or you would see nerve root compression, or even a scoliosis. And I'm like, whoa, this is fascinating.
Yeah.
That is what triggered me to go, okay, I'm about to take my healing to another level, and I went to chiropractic school from there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the process that I take is I sit with the patient, and then most of the time they'll come in with other diseases. A lot of times they don't come in for chiropractic, and then what we do is we sit them down, they give us a health history, and then we always take an x-ray now, because I want to see what the neurology is doing. If they have a wonderful spine,
Mm-hmm.
right, then I can say, got it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to look for the root cause over here,
Mm-hmm.
right? If their spine is not so great, now we're going to do both, right? We're going to deal with the neurology, because once we heal it, we don't want it to come back. Does
Right.
that make sense? So
Mm-hmm.
now we're going to reshape the spine so that the nerves can be free to service those organs. But
Yes.
we're also going to take the approach of what caused this. Let's remove that from your life. Let's remove the ultimate root cause from your life. If it's emotional, if you're not happy, if you're in a marriage you don't want to be in, if you got a dog that's taking your time, you really need to get rid of the dog. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Whatever that is, we
Yes.
need to remove that.
Mm-hmm.
If you're binge eating, let's try to get you to stop. Let's get you some counseling. If
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is you're doing, let's stop that to give you a chance at healing the first time, right? And then if a diet change is needed, obviously you're going to get that protocol, right? A
Mm-hmm.
lot of times we implement herbs, supplements to help the internal environment to heal, or help the brain to recognize that there's a disease there, so the brain can
Mm-hmm.
heal.
Mm-hmm.
It will also reshape the spine at the same time. So in
Mm-hmm.
my practice, we take a very thorough approach, from everything from, okay, now we know the root cause. Now we know this supplemental cause that's not allowing things to heal. So remember, the nervous system is never the reason why a disease comes. It's
Mm-hmm.
just the reason why it can't heal. And those are two different things. It's kind
Mm-hmm.
of like if you take, cancer,
Mm-hmm.
and how you approach it.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who has stage one cancer, they're fighting for their health. Someone
Mm-hmm.
who has stage four, they're fighting for their life. You don't
Mm-hmm.
approach those in the exact same way. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Mhm,
You know,
mhm. Yeah,
so
but even to know, and I like how you said that, but even to know that stage 4, like you said, you can still heal it. I like the way
oh,
you
absolutely. As a healer, and
Mhm,
the kind of healing work that I do, I've just seen a lot over the years. I've seen some
mhm,
very amazing things. I've seen some 11th hour, what most people would consider miracles that I take for granted at this point, healing. And
mhm.
then, I've also had some upsets,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, the
Mhm,
person has to want to live.
mhm. That's
And
right.
that's the big secret. That's
Mhm.
the big secret.
Yeah.
The secret to it all is, does the person actually care to live? And how hard are they willing to work to live? I can't tell you how many patients walk in there and they go, I don't care how sick I get, I'm just not going to stop eating this.
Yeah.
You know,
Right. Mhm.
That's because
Okay.
they're just, yeah.
Mhm.
I've seen
Mhm.
also the family members will call me up and say, "Hey, I got this family member, doctor gave them this much time to live, whatever the case may be. They may say 6 months, they may say 3 months. Is it healable? Oh, anything's healable." But when
Mhm.
I actually talk to the patient themselves,
Mhm.
it's shocking to me how they don't even want to live.
Mhm.
And they'll say it. They just will never say it to their family.
Mm. That's
Yeah, but you
yeah.
can always uncover that.
Yeah.
They don't want to be here.
Mhm.
So that's that's a big thing, and that happens more often than you think. You know,
Mm. Yeah.
people are secretly suicidal and
Hmm.
using disease as a way of offing themselves. Like
Mhm. Yeah. 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 No, no. We're
to
yeah.
hide
I
behind.
believe it. Because
Yeah,
we were talking about like, mental health when we kind of started in emotional health. So like you said, people are dealing with those things and then they manifest as the illness and, on purpose, kind of. You know what I mean?
oh
Like,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely.
That's so
Yeah,
deep.
there are times when the patient the will to live will turn on.
Mm-hmm.
At some point
Mm-hmm.
where they may not start off with the will to live, but something may happen in their life
Mm-hmm.
where it'll turn on their will to live,
Mm-hmm.
and boom, they go and heal themselves. I've seen that also.
Mm-hmm.
That the miracle wasn't in the fact that they healed. The miracle was in the light was sparked, and it came to them
Mm-hmm.
before it was too late. Like, oh, I can't die yet. I got
Yeah. I got stuff
something I
to do.
gotta do. Yeah,
I got
I
stuff
got
to
something
do
I
right
gotta
this
do.
minute.
You know,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
then I had a patient. This was, I want to say, about a year and a half, 2 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
um, maybe a little longer. And this is a very fascinating story
Mm-hmm.
where it is going to teach the audience a lot about the
Mm-hmm.
will to live. Where um, this one had diabetes, and it had just gotten out of control, where
Mm-hmm.
she started to get infections. So she ended up getting a toe cut off. Then she got a couple fingers cut off, and she's young,
Mm-hmm.
beautiful aesthetically. I mean, strikingly beautiful, very young. We're talking in her early 40s,
Mm-hmm.
getting limbs cut off.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I just asked her, I said, "Do you want to live, really?"
Mm-hmm.
Because she was always having her sessions with me,
Mm-hmm.
um, with someone else around. So I
Mm-hmm.
never had a chance to ask her, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so because I couldn't understand, all roads, when I kept asking why,
Mm-hmm.
nothing was leading to the fact that this was physical,
Mm-hmm.
nothing. And I
Yeah.
said, nah, there's something else going on here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
One day I just happened to get her by herself where the person she likes to, her teddy bear, hung up early,
Mm-hmm.
our call because she had to run. And then finally I had a chance to ask her, I said, boom, here it is. And I said, "Do you want to live?" I said, because there's a simple solution to this.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to stop doing this. Remember, we talked about, if you just stop doing what's making you sick, your body will heal. Well,
Right.
type 2 diabetes is one aspect of that. But for
Mm-hmm.
some reason, she wouldn't allow herself to have the strength to stop. She
Mm-hmm.
was allowing it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that's clear, right?
Yeah.
So it was never out
Mm-hmm.
of control. She just wasn't allowing it. And
Mm-hmm.
so I said, "Do you want to live?" And she got quiet and she said, "I don't know."
Mm-hmm.
That was it. That was her root cause. That was
Mm-hmm.
it. That
Mm-hmm.
was fun. So we got it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, now your homework is to ask yourself, why is it that you don't want to be here anymore? So that if you
Mm-hmm.
do find out you want to live, we can ground you to the planet and turn this thing around. And turns out she just felt alone.
Right.
So she was the only child. Both of her parents had died. She
Yeah.
didn't have any siblings, and she wasn't really close to distant family, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and she just felt by herself.
Yeah. And everybody else was on the other side. I understand that.
And she was going to go join them.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't want the embarrassment
Mm-hmm.
of suicide,
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
she was going to let the disease take her.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
so then I asked her later on, I said, "So what do you have to live for?
Mm-hmm.
If you had to live, what would you live for?" And she
Mm-hmm.
didn't have an answer for that.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't have an answer for that. So that answer just happened to come to her a few months later,
Mm-hmm.
lifted, and
Mm-hmm.
it lifted. And she just got so inspired
Mm-hmm.
to just reverse this thing and stay alive. And to
Mm-hmm.
this day, she
Mm-hmm.
she's 40 pounds down. She's no longer binge eating the sugar and all the things. And not only that, she's mentoring other people who have these grievances that go too far. That go too far.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's and then that's her purpose. So she found it.
Found her purpose. Yeah. Yeah.
And the light became bright again. And
Mm.
then there it was. You know,
Oh wow.
there it
I
was.
mean, you said so much today. I mean, I think there's so many kernels and so much important information. I mean, it's just been such a layered discussion, but we're gonna take a few minutes and answer some questions from the chat. So if you're in the audience, if you have any questions, please add those to the chat. So when there's one that was in there already, and it was about more about nutrition. So like, how does your nutrition fit in with, like, when you understand the root causes and you begin healing, like, how does nutrition fit in with that?
Yes. So keeping in mind that depends on the patient, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some
Mm-hmm.
patients come to me and they're already doing all the things. So the root
Mm-hmm.
cause is not that. But if nutrition is a problem, right? No matter what disease you have, the bottom line to that, you
Mm-hmm.
gotta have to clean that up.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the bottom line to that. You're gonna have to eat what I like to call clean but strong food. Clean
Mm-hmm.
but strong food, depending on the patient,
That's strong.
right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So nutrition has to come in place. So if I have a patient that has kidney failure,
Mm-hmm.
they have protein spilling, in abundance into their urine. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, obviously, that's a patient that we have to take off meat. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's just that's just a no brainer, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, every doctor would agree in that moment. You're spilling
Mm-hmm.
protein. We got to nail that. We got to tone it down a little.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so nutrition has to play a part to some degree because in order for a disease to even be there, there has to be some form of inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
So where's that inflammation coming from? Sometimes it's not nutrition, by the way, but nutrition comes in a lot of different forms. It's not just food. I want
Mm-hmm.
to make sure the audience knows that.
Mm. Yeah, that's
Nutrition can also come in clean air, clean water, food, yes, right?
mm-hmm.
America's stuck on food because it's so tangible and it's so easy,
Yeah.
but it's not always the root cause. And when you're sick, you find it out quite quickly when you
Mm-hmm.
clean everything up, and then you can't heal what it is you're trying to heal.
Mm-hmm.
So nutrition is sometimes also not being able to absorb. So what we have to do is provide the internal environment to have the nutrients to be able to just be absorbed.
Mm-hmm.
Vitamin and mineral deficiency, I can't say enough about that,
Yes, this is good. Mm-hmm.
is one of the common, I'm not going to ever say normal because disease is never normal, but it's one of the common reasons in America why disease will enter and not be able to leave. Because
Mm-hmm.
take a person that may be very ill from whatever disease it is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they may clean up their diet. I've had people start juicing. I've had people do this and that. And the memory just can't come back if they have, early stages of dementia.
Mm-hmm.
The bottom line is we need to do some work with the gut to be able to absorb the B vitamins so that the memory can return, or the iron deficiency, or the iron that's coming in. What combination of foods does that take?
Mm-hmm.
You know, how every vitamin and mineral depends on another one.
Mm-hmm.
That's very important to understand.
Yes.
So the bottom line is certain sources of iron you're just not going to be able to absorb without vitamin C and magnesium. Did you
Mm-hmm.
hear me say magnesium? Everybody's stuck on vitamin C, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's very important.
Mm-hmm.
Your cells are not going to move the way they should if glutathione, which is naturally produced in the body, is not there.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding your body and the state of your body is important. I like to send patients for labs. That's
Mm-hmm.
just our way of doing things.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Labs don't lie. If it's in the blood or not in the blood, that lab's going to tell us.
Mm-hmm.
If
Yeah.
it's there or not there, that
Yeah.
lab's going to tell us.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's important. So nutrition has to be there in order really for anything to heal, even if it's temporary. Now, what I will say is this:
Mm-hmm.
don't get stuck on um, just food. That's very important.
Yes,
Because
yeah.
food is never the
Nutrition is more than food. Hmm.
yes, yes, yes. I know some I know some people that don't got a disease the first that I mean, they gonna eat McDonald's and Burger King and and every cake, cookie, and pie on the planet. I
Hmm.
know these people. The
Hmm.
difference, though, is that they are living a life that resonates with them,
Whew. Yeah.
moment to moment, and they don't care what the world thinks about
Yes. I
it.
think that's so deep. I mean, I think that kind of just like, one of the big takeaways just from what our conversation today
Yes, yes.
is because people really think that you get sick because it's what you eat or, like you said, the environment, there's something in the air, something like that. But
Mhm.
this resonation, resonating, making sure you're leading a life resonating with yourself is so
Yes,
like,
yes, yes.
yeah, I think that's huge. That's huge.
It's
So
a
we
big
get,
start
yeah.
because if your life resonates with you, this is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can heal from anything. Grievances last too long.
Mm-hmm.
Being unhappy at work, for example, is a grievance,
Yes.
FYI,
Yes.
that produces an emotion that sets an energy inside of your mind, body, and spirit. Your
That's
spirit is constantly saying, we got to change. We need to change. We got to make a change.
that's right.
But fear, right, is what keeps us in this situation.
That's right.
And then it goes on too long.
Yes.
So the audience might ask, well, what does fear look like? Because I don't feel like I'm scared, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, fear is what makes you have to ask other questions like, I know I'm unhappy here,
Mm-hmm.
although I'm successful, although it pays all my bills, and I can live the lifestyle I want to live.
Mm-hmm.
Or are you really living the lifestyle you want to live if you're unhappy there?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's important to understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
For music workers, work is easier, right? We have a whole broad spectrum
Mhm.
of things that these patients come in with.
Yeah, no, it's true because I think that if you just like you might not want to go into work, you might not want to, like see certain people, it's like all of these things you have to kind of understand like why you're having that reaction to that.
Why are you having the reaction that you're having? And
Hmm.
it may not be the job itself, it may be the environment.
Yeah. That's a big
What
part.
I've learned as a business owner,
Hmm.
especially, right?
Yeah.
And my staff, is pretty big at this point, is never the job itself. Most people like doing what they're doing.
Hmm.
Most people can't sit beside the energy of the people that they work with.
That right. That's right.
You know, and sometimes you
Mhm.
just gotta make those hard decisions where you're like, I love
Yeah.
what I do, but do I
Yeah.
really want to keep dealing with this manager that's bullying me? Or do I want to keep working around these people that ain't doing nothing? I'm doing all this work because I'm
Well,
a workhorse, right?
I
And do I
know.
really
Start
want to keep
humming
doing
over
it?
here. Hmm.
Yes. And what
Yes,
I want to tell the audience is that you always have a choice.
that's right.
I mean, the choices, I don't care how young you are, how old you are, you always have a choice.
That's
You
right.
always have a choice. I have a very close friend of mine that we just did the energy work.
Hmm.
She was like, hey, listen, I'm retiring in 7 years. I'm not trying to change jobs and da 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 da, you know.
Hmm.
And I was like, I don't necessarily know that can be what that is. And she was like, well, what are we gonna do? We did the energy work.
Hmm.
And it shifted her into a job that she loves, where
Hmm.
now she's able to go and travel often to where she vacations.
That's right. Hmm.
Okay. But she wants to
Hmm.
get away from that old job. She would go here to vacation, but
Hmm.
now she was able to manifest a job that she loves.
Hmm.
That's the key. You
That's
got
right.
to be willing to do the work.
Hmm.
When the reason why you're ill is not food, or
Hmm.
it's just a choice you're making.
Hmm.
Why are you making that choice?
That's right.
Even if it is food, why are you making that choice?
Like why exactly?
Yes, like why?
Mhm.
Why?
That's so deep. That's so deep. We have a couple more questions. I'm gonna try to condense some of them together. So
Okay.
one question is like talking about the relationship between chiropractic medicine and healing, like your muscles and skeleton, like and how like adjustments help you do that. And then the next question is kind of maybe together. How do issues like scoliosis manifest, like like what are the effects besides your back, like what else can it do to your
Oh my
body?
God, yes. Those are two
So
good questions. So let's
okay.
start with the first one, and then you're
Okay.
going to remind me of the second one
Okay.
because they can be combined, but they're also very different. So let's
Okay.
repeat the first one
Yes.
so the
So the
audience know
first
and I
one,
know too.
yeah. So the first one is the relationship between chiropractic medicine and healing, like more than just your muscles or skeleton, like how the adjustments help your body.
Oh my God, absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely. So that decision for me to go to chiropractic school was a really big one, by the way, that tied into the naturopathic medicine that I was doing. But um, the question I have for the person that asked that question is this:
Mm-hmm.
what in your body can operate without its nerve?
Mm-hmm. That's it. Yeah.
Nothing. That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine a light bulb that went off in my head?
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
When that light turned on, I was like, oh my God, that's why the disease keeps coming back.
That's right. Yeah.
Nothing in your body can operate without its nerve. Not
Mm-hmm.
a muscle, gland, cell, tissue, organ. I don't care what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Even the brain itself has its own set of cranial nerves.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
I don't care what it is. Now, what happens is degeneration happens in the spine for many different reasons. Okay. I know, just by the way, age is not one of them. I want to make sure my audience is
Mm.
clear.
Yeah.
Age is not a reason for degenerative patterns.
Wow.
Is everything but that.
Wow.
That's why any doctor that tells you that the reason why you have something is age,
Yeah.
that's why they're
So
lazy.
many times. That's
Yeah,
true.
oh my God.
Yeah.
Because how many trips have we, you and both I,
Mm.
taken to Africa and done our research and see 100-year-olds walking around,
That's true. Mm-hmm.
you
Yep.
know, still
Mm-hmm.
kicking, and they're 110 and
Yep.
they're acting more youthful than we are. So
Mm-hmm.
age is never the reason why the disease is there. The moment your doctor tells you this age, walk out.
That's right.
Walk
Hmm.
out.
That's
They're the lazy ones that just want to prescribe something and get to the next patient.
mm-hmm.
That's the first thing. But nothing in your body can operate without its nerves,
Mm.
right? So
Yep.
if you can understand that concept, and I try to make that very simple for the patients or for the audience, then you can understand that if a patient is born with type 1 diabetes, take an x-ray. Got it?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
That gives you a lot of information, doesn't it? Type 1 is different than type 2. Type 2 is lifestyle related, but type 1, that pancreas is not working. But
Mm-hmm.
no, why is that pancreas not working?
Mm-hmm.
Why are those
That's right.
beta cells not doing what they need to do? That's the
Mm-hmm.
key. I can't tell
Yep.
you how many patients that come in and they got a scoliosis right there,
Mm-hmm.
right? At
Mm-hmm.
T6 to T9, where the liver sits on the right, and all
Mm-hmm.
those nerves are compressed. Guess what? What
Yeah.
happens when we correct the scoliosis? So
Mm-hmm.
then what happened was the most recent patient, I love their storytelling. I like this.
That's right. Keep going. Yes.
Yeah, the most recent patient that came in with type 1 diabetes, and we corrected the scoliosis there. It was fascinating. She goes back to her doctor, was like, "Hey, I've been going to the chiropractor. Can you take my labs?" I told her to go get the labs because I wanted to see if the pancreas kicked back on.
Mm-hmm.
So the doctor takes her off the type 1, the insulin, right? Takes her off the insulin, but puts her on type 2 diabetes medication
Mm-hmm.
because the doctor didn't want to admit that the nervous system actually played a part in why her pancreas wasn't working.
Mm-hmm.
So once we corrected the scoliosis that was there, the nerves began to do what? Service the pancreas. Now remember, everyone,
Mm-hmm.
the organs have a muscle component to them, right? That allows them to contract and release, contract and release. If the nerves cannot service that organ, will
Mm-hmm.
that organ do its job? The answer
Mm-hmm.
is absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
Just like
Yeah.
if a person gets into a car accident
Mm-hmm.
and the spine is injured, there's a reason why they can't walk
Mm-hmm.
if they're paralyzed. There's a
Mm-hmm.
reason. Does
Mm-hmm.
everybody understand that?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yep. And I think you're kind of going into the second question because it's like, how does that scoliosis like manifest in other parts of the body? So I think you
Yes, because it
want it.
doesn't allow the organs at those regions of the body where the nerve service to operate. So if you, for example, if you have a scoliosis, for example, in the cervical spine, or a reverse curve in the cervical spine, and the nerves are compressed,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you may have this neuroforaminal encroachment, or we call it just nerve root compression. Too big of a
Mm-hmm.
word. Sorry. Um, if the nerves are compressed, they can't service the thyroid.
Mm-hmm.
They can't service, anything.
Mm-hmm.
Can't
That's
service the thyroid, your eyesight, you got blurry vision. There's a lot going on. A prime example, upper cervical, a lot of patients that have uh, seizures, you
mm-hmm.
know, They label them the ones that have no cause,
Mhm.
epilepsy,
Mhm.
right? Anything epilepsy, right? Look to the nervous system.
Mhm.
I'm begging you, look to the nervous system or the gut,
That's right.
okay? Which oftentimes the gut is related to the nervous system. But sometimes a lot of patients who have upper cervical compressions, you'll find that they have seizures if they have, tumors in certain parts of the brain, laying on certain nerves that service that particular um, part of the body. They'll have seizures or they'll get a disease there.
Mhm.
Every patient that walks in my practice that has cancer,
Mhm.
taking an X-ray to see what's happening.
Mhm.
Taking an
Mhm.
X-ray to see what's happening.
Mhm.
Because if the lung diseases is a big one.
Yeah.
Thoracic spine being compressed
Mhm.
and asthma. All these different lung diseases. Now, I want to put a caveat to this one. Now, if you smoke, okay,
Mhm. Yeah.
then obviously that has a slant. So let's just be
Yeah.
sensitive. You know.
Yes, there are things going on as well. Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. But you oftentimes when I take that X-ray, the patient, their diagnosis that their primary care physician sends with them to my office, oftentimes you can find the disease in their nervous system as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because the nerves that service that particular organ is not servicing that organ. So that organ is not functioning at
Mhm.
its highest.
Mhm.
So there are different degrees of organ function, right? You always want your organs to function at its possible highest throughout your entire life. That's how
Mhm.
you live a long time.
Mhm.
Make
That's
sense?
yes,
Yeah. So
absolutely.
yes,
Yeah.
so there's two different types of death, right? The
Mhm.
person that chooses to go
Mhm.
and the person that goes and they're not choosing it. Okay.
Mhm.
Oftentimes when they're not choosing it is either a traumatic accident of some
Mhm.
kind or a traumatic event, or
Mhm.
the organs will give out.
Mhm.
Which organ, right? Or a multiple organs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Or they just decide they don't want to be here anymore. I think we all have that ancestor that said, "Oh, I'm just ready to go," and then
Mhm.
they just go. Right?
Mhm.
I got one of those as well.
Mhm.
So there, So when I teach classes, a lot of times I often, especially to other doctors, I often will start the class off with, "How do you die?
Hmm. Yeah.
How do you die?"
Yeah.
That's the first question that I ask.
Mhm.
And I want the doctors to really think about that, because if you can understand how a person goes and the different multiple facets of that, then you
Mhm.
can also understand how to heal it.
Yep. That's right.
How
I
to,
think people are so scared of that death, though. I think
yeah,
that's, people are scared of that
yeah,
concept.
yeah. Well, doctors shouldn't be, because that's what we deal with all the time.
Yeah. I think even doctors, so yeah, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
they shouldn't be. They deal with it all the time. In fact, if most doctors in America did what they were supposed to do, more patients would heal. If hospitals did what they were supposed to do,
Mhm.
more patients would stay alive.
Mhm.
If
Mhm.
they just did. I've never in my life, we spoke about earlier the patient that
Mhm.
was having the limbs cut off because of the severe diabetic neuropathy and the
Mhm.
infections. The hospital would give her dessert with every meal.
Mhm. Yeah.
That was baffling for me
Like why?
because her
Exactly.
issue was eating the sugar,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So that was baffling for me. So, what is your intention there? As
Mhm.
a doctor, that you're in a hospital and you can't regulate that patient's meal, but you're the doctor.
Mhm.
You
Exactly.
see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
So the nervous system plays a part in organ function, muscles, glands, cells, tissues,
Mhm.
flow of energy, right?
Mhm.
Every single last bit of it. I don't care what it is. It cannot
Mhm.
operate without the nerve.
Wow.
That is the bottom line to that. And
Mhm.
that is why every time we take an x-ray, it just makes my life easier. It just I'm
Mhm.
like, got it. And it's even easy if the nervous system is not present. And then keeping in mind, I want to remind the audience that I said this earlier, the
Mhm.
nervous system is never the reason why the the actual illness is there. It's just the reason why it can't heal. I want to make
Mhm.
sure that's clear.
Yeah.
So you have the disease, you still have to find the root cause of it.
Mhm.
Why? Because many people have nervous system degeneration, but the disease never enters the body. So we
Mhm.
still have homework to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Correcting the actual spine just makes healing easier.
Mhm.
You just don't have to work so hard to do it. you know.
Yes.
My spine, I never had a scoliosis. I didn't have disc degeneration and all these things
Mhm.
when I was healing my fibroids.
Mhm.
So they were easy to heal because the energy flow or
Mhm.
the electricity was
Mhm.
already turned on to my uterus.
Yep. I
Yeah.
understand. Yep. That makes a lot of sense. So, Dr. Asi, I mean, this has just been wonderful. So, I mean, thank you for blessing us with your wisdom and your presence. I mean, and your journey just reminds us that healing is possible, when we get to the root. So, what do you want the audience, to kind of take away from everything that you said today? What is the thing like, know
Yes.
this, learn this? What, give us a couple of things you want them to.
My prayer is that it wasn't too overwhelming for the audience. That's my prayer always.
Yes. Mhm.
There's a few takeaways that I want the audience to know. Number one, just check in with your energy. Make sure you're happy. If you're not happy, make the changes.
Mhm.
That way, we can remove that aspect from your orbital field as well. The
Mhm.
second thing is, yes, go to the doctor. Don't ever stop doing that. Labs are important, and always ask why. The
Mhm.
why should be the first question out of your mouth. And if a doctor can't tell you why, that's not your doctor.
Mhm.
That's important to understand.
Mhm.
And I mean that for every doctor, not just medical doctors.
Mhm.
I'm talking about naturopathic doctors. I'm talking about chiropractors. I'm talking about
Mhm.
acupuncturists. I'm talking about dentists.
Okay. Yep.
Dentists not knowing how to heal cavities naturally baffles me
Mhm. Oh,
because it's easy.
yeah, yeah.
It's easy.
That's so
You
deep.
know,
Yeah. Look, that's a whole nother conversation. That's deep.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So ask them. It's not enough to go and say, hey, you need a root canal because this is happening.
Mm,
Why is this happening, doc?
mhm,
Why? Do you
mm,
mind if we do the test to find out why this is happening?
mhm,
And then make them do it. Now, this is
mhm,
the key. Now, this is your armor.
mhm.
If you ask for a test, did y'all know that they have to do it?
I didn't know.
Yes, they
Yeah.
can't tell you no. And
Okay.
you can threaten to turn them into the board if they don't take the test. Do
Mm,
you know what will happen? Is that they'll
wow.
quickly write that prescription for that lab.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very quickly.
That's
Yeah. They
interesting.
lose the ego quick.
Mhm,
Okay.
mhm. That
Because
is. Yeah.
if they didn't do the lab, they're
Mm,
shooting in the dark.
mhm. Yes. So. Yep.
That's the
Yep.
bottom line. I had a patient come in. The doctor told him he was diabetic. The
Mm,
doctor told him that the reason why he had numbness and tingling in his feet was because of the diabetes. They told him it was diabetic neuropathy. I took one look at his feet and knew that that wasn't it.
mm,
Diabetic neuropathy presents itself a certain way in that patient's foot. Okay, they're gonna have dead skin. They're
mm,
gonna have all black spots. They're gonna have toes gonna be black, no circulation going down there. That's a whole thing down there.
mhm. That's right.
This patient's feet was amazing. I
Mhm.
was like, boy, I need these
Yeah.
feet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. So what did it prompt me to do? Take an x-ray
Yeah.
because the nerves in the lumbar spine serve as what? All of your lower extremities. So
Mhm.
if they're compressed, the patient's going to have radiculopathy of some form or some type of numbness and tingling.
Mhm.
Does
Mhm.
that make sense? So
Yes.
once I did that, we did the work to open up the disc spaces and boom, there you go.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is amazing. So, okay, so Dr. Asia, say, our audience, they want to get in touch with you. They want to, like, how do they get in contact with you? Where are you and what are you doing? What are you doing? What do you do?
Yes. Call
Yeah.
my office.
Okay.
That's the first thing.
Mhm.
If you call the office, then my CAs won't be mad at me for booking something outside of them.
Okay.
So the
Yeah.
phone
So we
number
can.
there is 678-667-4660.
Mhm.
And the office is located in Fayetteville, Georgia.
Okay. Yep. So thank you so much. And to
This has
everyone
been
tuning in,
fun.
yeah, this has been
I'm
awesome.
sorry it was so layered.
No, I think this is good because I think people really need to hear about that. So we can always, we can talk again and go deeper, but I think there's like really some basics that, kind of just really make you think. Like, the whole why thing, that and just really being happy with where, your life and what you're doing and how that affects your health. I think those things are
Oh, absolutely.
so, yeah, they're so core. And so I
Every
think this is
decision
important.
that you make in your life resonate with you. And
That's
if
right.
it doesn't, why would you do it?
That's
That's the
right.
key. Does
That's right.
every decision in your life resonate with you? If you're
Mhm.
making that decision, are you happy with the decision you're making? Nobody's making you make it. Does
Mhm.
it resonate with you? And if the answer is yes, go for it. If the
Yep.
answer is no, find a different route to get where you need to go. That's
That's right. That's right. Okay, so thanks everyone for tuning in. Guys, just remember that our Sable Women Spirit boxes are 50% off now through the end of May. So we know they're not just beautiful keepsakes, they're intentional healing kits. So check those out. So, family, remember your symptoms are messengers. When you learn to listen, they will lead you back to your power. So, keep asking questions, ask why, keep trusting your body, and keep uncovering your hidden healing. So, we'll see you next Sunday. So, peace and blessings always. And thank you so much, Dr. Asia.
All right. Thank you.